Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor filling in for Alex again. Today we're going to be discussing the ACC championship between SMU and Clemson. I'm expecting a really tight game with this conference championship as well. My goodness, what a conference championship weekend we have. Again, none of those big spreads. A lot of these games are predicting to be close by Vegas, and it wouldn't shock me if this one came down to the very last possession, very similar to the Big 12 championship in that preview that we put out yesterday. When it comes to the Tigers against the Mustangs, you're looking at a team with SMU who has been fantastic in getting to the quarterback, pressuring the quarterback. Five SMU players have at least 30 quarterback pressures this season. They are one of only two teams in the entire country with more than three players with 30 plus pressures, and they are the only team with five guys with at least 30 quarterback pressures. And the Clemson offense hasn't been terrific in pass blocking this year. In fact, Clemson's offensive line ranks tied for 47th in the country in sacks allowed, and then they rank in the 50s in tackles for loss allowed. SMU, as I mentioned, they're really good at pressuring the quarterback, and SMU is also really good at getting home to the quarterback and finishing off the play. SMU is tied 11th in the country in sacks forced and 12th in the country in team total tackles for loss. So the SMU defense is really good at pressuring the quarterback. And again, as I mentioned with the SMU offense, their weakness has been allowing tackles for loss. And when you look at the weakness of the SMU defense, again, they're really good at pressuring the quarterback, but they kind of have like an all or nothing kind of style. They rank 85th in the country in passing yards allowed, despite a passing defense that actually ranks 31st in pass efficiency and pass defense efficiency. So SMU ranks good on a play-to-play basis in the secondary, but because of their all or nothing kind of style, defensively, they give up a lot of passing yards. Clemson's offense, at least this season, has improved a little bit in the passing game. We know that the last few years the Clemson receiving core has not been what it was, say 6, 7, 8 years ago. But the Clemson receiving core is a little bit improved this year, and then Cade Klubnik has stepped up his game at least a little bit. And so Clemson now is 16th in the country in passing yards, in passing offense. So again, the passing game for Clemson has improved. So when you look at this matchup on the field, it's really going to come down to that Clemson offensive line against the SMU defensive line. Whichever team wins that respective battle is probably going to come out on top. Now, in regards to the Mustangs this year, how about SMU? Let's discuss SMU here in respect. It's their first year in the ACC, so let's give them that respect. They're playing for the conference championship in the very first year of the conference. Remember last year, SMU in the previous several years was in the American Athletic Conference, and in 2023, SMU won the AAC title over Tulane. And we saw Kevin Jennings, who is now SMU's starting quarterback, and I should say established starting quarterback. He really came onto the scene in last year's AAC title. And remember, Preston Stone was the SMU quarterback before Jennings came out onto the scene. Jennings stepped in that title game, and it was at Tulane. And once the news came out that Stone was not going to partake in that game, everyone assumed Tulane was going to win. Tulane had just won the conference title in 2022, and they had been playing pretty well. I know they had some close games in 2023. But once the news was Stone, everyone assumed Tulane was going to win, and then SMU had a really good, strong performance in that game. And then, of course, we saw SMU lose in the bowl game to Boston College. And then to start this season, Stone was once again announced as the starting quarterback, but then didn't really perform that well. I kind of think he was dealing with some injuries as well in the early goings of this season. Jennings stepped in, and ever since then, SMU has really been playing well down the stretch. You look statistically with SMU, I mentioned their really good defensive front, but SMU is pretty good in almost everything. They're not great at anything outside of the pass rushing department, but they're pretty good in almost everything except for the passing yards allowed. But as I mentioned in the first couple minutes of this video, the pass efficiency defense still ranks pretty good. But one could question SMU's strength of schedule. They have not beat a ranked team all season. And up to this point, they've only faced one, maybe two, arguably pretty good teams with BYU and then Louisville. And so has SMU really been tested that much? Of course, they beat Louisville on the road, and that was an impressive win in which they kept a lead pretty much the entire second half of that game. Louisville stayed in it, but it felt like SMU was a better team. And then ever since that loss to BYU, since Jennings has established himself as that starting quarterback and a legit starting quarterback, SMU has been really tough. Tough to beat in the ACC. And again, in their first year in the conference. So last year they played for an AAC title and won it. Now they're playing for the ACC title and have a chance to win that and perhaps make the college football playoff. So before I get into that, let's get into the prediction now for the ACC championship. It just seems too good to be true for SMU to win in their first year. I'm not saying they can't. They're a 2-point favorite in the game, and they've been playing very well, of course, as I just mentioned. SMU beat Duke a few weeks ago, despite Duke winning the turnover battle 6-0. I think that tells you how good of a team SMU is, that they have room for error. Now, again, is that in respect to who they have played in the ACC this year? Yeah, maybe so. I mean, they haven't played Clemson, they haven't played Miami. And they haven't played Georgia Tech either. And so I think one could question again that strength of schedule. They haven't played Syracuse. And so Duke, who is sitting at 9-3, I wonder if Duke could perhaps be in the CFP top 25 come Sunday. I'll get to that to that reason here in a second why I bring that up. But in regards to my prediction, who I think is winning the ACC championship, I'm going to go with Clemson to find a way to beat SMU to give the Ponies their first ACC loss, even though it's not a regular season loss, obviously, but it'll be their first loss in league play since joining the conference. So I'm going to go with the Clemson Tigers to win a close one, which leads me to my transition into the second portion of this video. If SMU loses, does the committee dare put a three-loss Alabama team who is not even going to be suiting up this Saturday in the college football playoff over a two-loss and a current and at that point an 11-2 SMU Mustang team? To me, it comes down to how SMU loses the ACC title. We all understand that if SMU beats Clemson in the ACC title, that Clemson, with that being their fourth loss and no conference championship, and they're not in the thick of things right now without that auto bid, Clemson would be out. They're barely in the playoff hunt right now, and Alabama would then be in. The question is, if SMU loses, does SMU still make the college football playoff, or does Alabama get put in? That's the question. So to me, it comes down to how SMU loses this game, how much they lose by. Again, of course, if they lose. I say if SMU loses a close game to Clemson, so either down to the wire or it's back and forth and it ends up being a 3 or 6 or 7 point game, or how about this? Put it simply, if it's a single digit game that Clemson wins, I think SMU is in the college football playoff and Alabama barely misses out. If Clemson beats SMU decisively, then things might get interesting. But the reason why I actually think, again, as long as they don't lose by a large margin, that SMU is in the college football playoff here is because of this. Indiana, I think we assume is a lock to make the college football playoff at this point, is 11-1, but Indiana is not even going to be playing for a conference championship this weekend. So they, just like Alabama, are not going to be suiting up. They're going to be sitting on their couch watching all the conference championship games this weekend, but they are in at 11-1 without a conference championship victory, or without, again, even playing for a conference championship. So SMU, who is 11-1 and is playing in a conference championship, you're telling me that SMU, who is playing for a conference title, is going to be punished if they lose, rather than Indiana, who doesn't have a ranked win either, just like SMU, is going to not be punished? You see, that's where I think the committee would have a hard time arguing knocking out Indiana or knocking out SMU completely if they don't lose in decisive fashion. Now, again, it gets interesting if Clemson beats them by a large margin, where we are now looking at SMU in a questionable fashion, like, okay, are the Mustangs really that good? Because they haven't played, so in the ACC this year. So to me, it is how SMU loses this game if they end up making the college football playoff. So it's unfortunate to me that we're playing a full season and we're still scrutinizing these three-loss teams compared to this team that hasn't even lost a conference game all season. See, I think the format of the college football playoff of the expanded playoff needs fixing, no doubt. And I wouldn't be shocked if in the next year or two or three that we see the playoff expand even a little bit more, maybe like to 16 teams. Um, SMU should be in the playoff regardless. I mean, again, unless they lose like 45 to nothing or something like that, or 45 to 10. Otherwise, they should be in the college football playoff. I mean, if they lose by a single digit margin, there shouldn't be any worry. There shouldn't be. I'm not saying there won't be, but there shouldn't be any worry that the Mustangs should be in the college football playoff, with the close loss to Clemson. So that'll do it for this video. Hopefully the playoff committee makes the right choice here. Again, depending on the margin of victory for either team here. But it gets really interesting if Clemson wins by a decisive margin. But a close Clemson win, and I think we see two ACC teams in the expanded playoff field. Stay tuned for the next video as we are going to be discussing the Big Ten championship between Penn State and Oregon.